not to replace the territory with the map. Quantities are descriptions of the thing in itself, not the thing in itself. And that's another reason why materialism can never work. It replaces the territory with the map and tries to pull the territory out of the map, which will never work, not even in version 3.0 or 1,000,000.0 of the map. There are also empirical reasons why materialism is
it's not like what he's saying here is completely incorrect. He's appealing to the paradox built into what he calls the materialist thinking. And I'm completely on board with that paradox. It's paradoxical way of seeing things without realizing it, right? But it sounds like an appeal to, and therefore we have to ditch that complete thinking. I don't think that is a good thing. And I might be a little ahead of myself here, but it starts to sound like they're bad, as I pointed out, and therefore you should go and listen to my alternative, which is, by the way, the only alternative, right? While at the same time he will bring in science, which is sort of based on materialist approach, you could say. How can he do that then? If materialists are usually scientists, or scientists are usually materialists, right? Then science is invalid then. So how can he use science in as a foundation for his analytic idealism or idealism in general? Because if it's based on the idea that it's outside and he is refuting it as an outside, then science is fallacious. Or what, right? It will be interesting to see how he tackles that. Or is he just going to say, yeah, no, I'm bringing in science, which are based on somebody who are materialists, right? Or has he been cherry-picking science, asking the scientist who did it that, are you an idealist or a materialist? And if it doesn't matter, why doesn't it matter, right?
Demonstrably false. In foundations of physics today, we know that...
Oh, the appeal to the group, right? We know? I don't know. How could I know? Can you just tell me I know? So now I have knowledge of something you haven't even clarified yet? This is we know, right? That is an approach that materialists take, right? Yes, there's a scientist over there who did some science, came up with a paper that has been peer-reviewed. So now everybody knows this, right? That is bad philosophy. And he apparently taps in, we all know this. And, another thing is, how can he appeal to knowledge when he's apparently doing metaphysics, right? Because, in my opinion, you have to have your metaphysics solved in something like I did, in my opinion, in my video called The Structure of My Metaphysics. And when you're looking at that structure, then you're sort of pinpointing what of it that you would consider knowledge and what you wouldn't consider knowledge, right? Is it the colors that are knowledge? Is the elephant knowledge? Is it science that is the knowledge? Is it, an equation that is knowledge? What is knowledge, right? You can't appeal to knowledge when you're doing this kind of settling on a structure of your experience, right? Then you're begging the question. Once again, right?
The fundamental physical entities that seem...
And that points, as I've also said in an earlier part of this, I think, that it seems to me that what he thinks is, well, I have come up with the perfect metaphysics, and therefore I have answered all the questions you can possibly answer in philosophy, right? Ignoring the idea of epistemology and ignoring the idea of ethics, right? As if it just pops out of metaphysics somehow, right? Be very, very, very cautious with this, right?
To constitute the world, in other words, elementary subatomic particles like electrons, quarks, muons, and so on. We know that these elementary building blocks of the physical world do not have standalone existence.
And atoms or force fields or whatever, right? These are abstractions. These are abstractions. These are models. These are ideas. What term you want to put on it, right? Nobody has experienced a gravitational field. They might have experienced the effect of the field, but that is not the same as saying you have experienced the field, right? So he wants to be very strict against materialism, but then he wants to go and cherry pick whatever he needs from that materialism and bring it over to idealism and say, yeah, this can explain idealism. That just sounds, it's sort of, it's another one of these cases where somebody like Bernardo Kastrup has gotten a very, let's say, deep insight, which is that identifying that paradox built into normal materialist thinking, right? That people usually grow up with, right? And then thinking, because I saw that, and there are not a lot of people who have realized this. Now I am a special kind of insight person who can come up with all this fancy philosophy that can explain everything, right? It going from being sort of humble materialist to becoming a megalomaniacal idealist, right? I don't like that. I don't like that very much, right?
Do not have standalone reality. They only come into existence upon measurement. You have to measure the world to get subatomic particles. Before
they come into it. So the elephant, if I'm looking at an elephant and I turn around and I no longer experience the elephant is not there. Right? Because apparently that elephant is made of these particles or whatever, right? So if I'm not looking at the elephant is not there. How would I know? Because I'm not looking, right? I can't make a proposition because I'm not experiencing. I don't have knowledge of the elephant when I turn around. Is this a sort of epistemological problem? Because all these idiot academic philosophers hiding in the ivory tower have never come up with a definition of knowledge, right? So now they're sitting there, well, I'm not measuring. I can't say there are atoms. No, of course you can't, because you're not measuring, you're not experiencing, you don't have empiricism, right? But just because you don't have empiricism doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion that you can say it's not there. Because if you're not measuring, you will have to say, I don't know if it's there, right? It's this lack of ability to say, I don't know, right? You have to learn to say, I don't know, right? Maybe I was a little quick on the trigger when I said a proposition only have two answers. It actually has a third option, which is kind of rare, right? It's the I don't know answer, right? An example could be, right? I'm talking to somebody and they say, look, the earth is round. And I look and I say, I don't know, because I can't see the roundness, right? We can discuss whether or not round is a kind of knowledge. I would say it isn't. I think it's an abstraction from knowledge. But let's just say we have classified roundness of Earth as knowledge, right? Somebody pointing and say, look, the Earth is round. And I say, I don't know, because I can experience the Earth or a part of it, right? That which you're pointing to, which I'm usually classify as Earth, right? But I can't see the roundness, right? I can't see at least the complete roundness, right? An arc is not round, right? It has a curvature, but curvature is not round, right? Round is when it goes all around in the circle, right? Now, we usually use the term round, and maybe that's not the best term to use, right? But to say, it's a ball, it's a circle, something like that, right? And I would have to say, I don't know. I can't say it's not because I'm experiencing Earth, right? And it seems to have a shape. So I cannot say and can't say it isn't round, right? Because I don't have the full shape of it. And because I don't have the full shape of it, I can't say it round either, right? So I would have to say I don't know, right? In that particular case. And I think it's this lack of ability or will to say, I don't know. And define what you mean by knowing, right? Also very important in my opinion. Extremely fucking cornerstone of philosophy, right? Of one's philosophy.
Before you measure the world, you cannot say that there are subatomic particles to be measured. Now, how do we know this? We know this from a series of experiments that has now been going.
Where you use your eyes and ears and so on, right? Yes, it's just qualia that has been interpreted in a certain way, right? So now we are back to square one. You're not explaining anything using science because you need your qualia in order to get to do science, which is called empiricism, right? He doesn't understand the circularity of this kind of argumentation structure. So it's never going to fly, this. Never in a fucking billion years, right? Because he's trying to extract himself away from qualia because they're so annoying, right? These colors, no, I have to go into my cloud castles where I can create and bring in science as I see fit and create a structure so I, whatever, right? Whatever agenda he has, right? No.
On for over 40 years. And what we do, we produce two elementary subatomic particles together, so they are entangled.
But particles don't exist, right? They are little fields, rather, or huge fields, right? That basically could go across the universe, as far as I understand, right? So how can you talk about particles then? Is this particle wave duality, something like that problem? The double slit, whatever, right?
And we shoot one in one direction and we shoot the other in the other direction at almost the speed of light.
What do you mean we? I'm not shooting anything, right? Who are those people shooting? And what tools do they use? And who are paying for those tools, right? Oh, the little people. Those who are not in the aristocracy of academia in modern, welfare state environment, right? They just have to pay so these high-flying academics elites can go down in their accelerators and shoot little particles left and right because they find it so fancy and interesting, right?
Let's call them particles A and B. And then, say, scientist Alice, after a while, performs a measurement on particle A, and on the other.
How do you perform a measurement? How do you perform a measurement on a particle, right? On a particle. What is that, right? That's not very well defined in this kind of. I don't buy this, right? Yeah, you just perform a measurement on that particle, right? Yes.
The other side of the universe, but at the same time.
If I would say, when you're doing philosophy, right? Whatever you refer to is something that you can access by your own accord without doing science, right? You cannot bring in somebody measured something down there 4,000 kilometers away, and somebody told me that that's what the result, and therefore I have to adapt it into my philosophy. No, because they had to have a philosophy in order to get to where they get to that conclusion. Did you scrutinize their philosophy? No. So you don't know whether or not they are arriving at whatever they claim to arrive at. At the foundation, there has to be philosophy. And the foundation of your decisions have to be your philosophy. And you can't do a science to cushion your philosophy, because you need to do the philosophy before you can do the science, right? This circular idea is maybe the biggest problem in this approach he has, because he's basically saying, I'm violating my philosophy. I'm violating the reasoning structure of what I'm doing. I am doing philosophy, and then I'm violating philosophy to get to science in order to explain my philosophy. That sucks like a vacuum, right? With a formula in it.
Scientist Bob makes a measurement on particle B. It turns out that what Bob sees when he measures particle B depends on what Alice chooses to measure about particle A. In other words, we cannot say that what Bob sees was a particle that already existed prior to Alice making the choice of what to measure. Instead, the conclusion, which is now...
How can you know what you measure at the other end of, if you're not doing the measurement? If you're over there and he's over there, because of relativity, you can't be at the same time at two different places, right? So if he's experiencing X over here and he's relaying it to that other person over there, then it's no longer science, right? Then it's no longer a measurement. Then it's a report of a measurement. Then you're comparing your measurement with a report of a measurement, and then you're violating science, right? Because a report of something is not science. Science is when you're doing that experiment and you're experiencing whatever you do empirically, right? Writing something down in an article, that's not science anymore, right? As much as you want it to be, it isn't, right?
Unavoidable short of some theoretical fantasies, the conclusion is that particles A and B do not exist prior to measurement. They exist only upon a measurement on the world. So the world itself cannot be constituted of particles, because the thing you measure is not a particle. Particle arises from measurement. Now the two...
A particle... No. Hang on, mate, right? A particle is a mental model that scientists create, or somebody, a thinker maybe, right? A particle is a model, is a geometrical model. That doesn't arrive out of the... You have some qualia that you interpret some way and compare it to your model called a particle. And see, does it fit with what I predicted, right? But the particle doesn't come out of the experiment, man. How can you say that? You're not creating particles by doing whatever you do with whatever instrument, right? I'm not sure what the hell he's trying to say here, man. It sounds completely crazy, man.
Two theoretical fantasies that could avoid this conclusion are, one of them is the notion that there are countless physical universes popping into existence every infinitesimal fraction of a second, for which we have absolutely zero empirical evidence.
Well, it's not impossible, right? So, okay, that's one explanation. If you like it, run with it, right? If we don't, right? I don't. I mean, if I'm only have access to one universe, let's say, right? Because that's where I'm at. I am in that whatever I call the universe, right? I am the experience of universe. And I'm not saying that there's a universe beyond my universe, right? But that what I have access to is an experience which I personally classify as a representation of something outside. And I can't know whether or not there's the gazillions of universes or there's just one, right? What I have access to is my experiences. And he's walking that tightrope between the inside and the outside. I don't like this, right? It's sort of he's balancing there. So you might fall for the trap that he's all sort of, he can see both ends of this, right? While I can't tell you what he experiences, just like you can't tell me what he experiences, right? But if it's anything like what I experience, I just have these colors and sounds and so on, right? So the idea of that outside is a remnant that has to be justified when you realize that there's a paradox built into that materialist. It's a remnant of the materialism, right? And you have to argue, when you identify the paradox built into materialism, you then have to start to justify why you're talking about an outside in the first place. And it seems he thinks that, yeah, there's still an outside. Right? Why? Because the outside that the materialist was just habitual thinking. Habitual thinking is not philosophy, right? That's exactly not philosophy. Philosophy is something that has to be argued, right? And if you can argue from, well, it follows from this, then you have to do it axiomatically, or you don't do it at all, right? Then you stay with what you've got. If you have to go beyond your argumentation structure or your logic or whatever, things that follow from another thing and so on, right? Then you have to do it axiomatically, in my opinion. And that's why I keep asking for him to explain. He's probably not listening to this, right? But explain how he gets to say there is an outside. I'm not saying he can't do it. He just has to clarify how he does it. He can't just pretend that it's there, right? He's tapping into that habitual thinking of mine and yours, right? Or that if you're an idealist or you have identified the paradox, you might not, think that way anymore. But this idea of an outside keeps lurking somewhere. And just because it keeps lurking in your mind doesn't mean all of a sudden you can derive it from your experiences, right? That's what I'm trying to get across. And I want him to state very clearly how he gets to it. And if he can't state that, I'm not buying it. Unless he then says, okay, I'm doing it axiomatically. I'm simply metaconsciously deciding to treat it as such. Okay? Okay.
This is a fantasy, and it's one of the most implausible fantasies conceivable to human thought. The other fantasy is that there are so-called hidden variables about the world that orchestrate these correlations between the measurements of Alice and Bob. But we don't even have a hypothesis about what those hidden variables might be, not even a theoretical hypothesis, and certainly not an iota of.
Well, I get a notion that it's something akin to, Christians trying to refute Darwinism or something like that. They're trying to find, okay, Darwinism or the evolution might be explaining 99.999% of everything. And there's a few gray areas where we're sort of still looking into it, right? Sort of, if you get my drift. And then the Christians will say, aha, there's something that isn't explained fully by Darwinism, and therefore Darwinism can be refuted, right? It's like saying, you made a map of Europe, but there's something missing over there on the map, and therefore I can't trust the map at all, right? That's not how it works, right? He tries to find something about the ongoing picture building or reality building by using science, and it might have its built-in limitations because, we're trying to address our experiences without knowing what it is. We don't have access to an explanation. So what science basically does is, okay, I have this object over there that is round, and I'm comparing to that other object that is also round. how much round is it compared to that round, and so on, right? So we don't bring in some fancy ideas. It's always something we experience that we compare to something else that we experience, or we throw them together and see what happens, right? A cow is something that dies when it's thrown from the Eiffel Tower, right? Something like that, right? So that's a description. We do something and observe, right? That's basically what it is. It's just, observing stuff, comparing it, and throwing it at each other and see what happens, right? That's science. That's all it is, right?
Empirical evidence for them. So they too are pure fantasy. So short of these woo fantasies, we are left with the conclusion that the world prior to measurement or observation is not physical. The thing that we measure is not.
But no, now he's making a straw man argument here, I think, right? I'm very careful that he's not trying to screw with me, right? He's saying because materialist says that because they think that their experience is the actual outside themselves, right? Then when they say that is made of matter, then they're saying the outside is made of matter. Without realizing, they're just pointing to their insides. But then Bernardo Kastrup says, well, they can't say that about the outside, so the outside cannot be matter, right? You see the trick? And then you can say, therefore, you have to listen to me instead, right? No, all you have to do to the materialist, make them realize the inherent paradox in the thinking and illuminate to them that what they're actually describing is their insight, right? That would actually, in my opinion, make science even more rigid if they would realize this.
Not physical. Physical is the result of measurement. Now, how can we make sense of this? Well, it's very, very simple. Let's go back to the airplane metaphor and the dashboard.
I'm not too particular fond of this airplane metaphor at this point, right? Because as it alludes to a situation where those sitting in the cockpit with the airplane dashboard there, right? Where the pilots obviously must have an understanding of what is outside and that there is an outside, first of all, right? There is an outside of the dashboard. Because they have been there. They walk from the outside of the plane into the dashboard scenario, right? And then, took off into the sky, right? So they expect there to be that which they left outside because they have been there, right? But nobody is stepping into their experiences, right? It's not coming from the outside, stepping into their experiences and saying, yeah, and this experience is supposed to be understood like this and that and the other, because they have never been outside their experiences. That is why they end up with this potential fallacious understanding that their experience is the actual outside, right? If they had been there, which you can't, in my opinion, right? You are locked inside your experiences. That's why it's a dangerous metaphor, because it alludes to that you should be able to say something about what the meaning is of that dashboard. The pilots can say that because they know there is an outside and they have an idea of what to expect from that outside because they've been there, right? This is very, 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 very dangerous what he's doing, right?
The dashboard only displays something if the airplane's sensors measure the world outside, measure air speed, measure air humidity. And then those measurements are displayed on the dials of the dashboard. If nothing is measured, the dials show nothing. And is this surprising? It's not surprising at all. It only means that the world out there is not physical. Physicality is a representation that arises from measuring the world. It's an indication on the dials of the dashboard. That's all it means. And the correlations between what Alice chooses to measure and what Bob sees when he makes his measurement are also very easily explainable in the same terms. I will use another metaphor.
Why not just explain it as it is. Why are you using metaphors, right? Constantly using metaphors. It's like if you ask somebody what is an orange, well, it's like a yellow ball. Okay, it's like a yellow ball, but then it's not a yellow ball, right? If it's like something, then you're not describing the thing itself, right? So would you mind this, rather than using the metaphor of a yellow ball, tell me what it is, right? So metaphors can be useful to illuminate some kind of understanding. So a metaphor used to present an analogy, right? So the metaphor is the yellow ball, right? As the orange. Instead of the orange, I use the metaphor of a yellow ball, but the yellow ball doesn't explain the orange, right?
Suppose you are a soccer fan, and there will be an important soccer game, and you want to watch it from home, and you are such a fan that you buy 2 television sets, and you watch the same soccer game on both television sets.
Let's finish this.
Each TV tuned to a different broadcaster. And suppose that each broadcaster has their own set of cameras in the stadium. So you see 2 different images on the 2 television sets, but 2 different images of the same game. Therefore, what happens on one image correlates perfectly with what happens on the other image, without the TVs having to communicate with one another. Now imagine that you have a friend who is a time traveler, and he just came to visit you from the 19th century to watch the soccer match with you in the 21st century. He sees that the images on the little man on the 2 televisions, their behavior is completely correlated with one another. If the little man...
How does he know it's correlated, right? First he has to look at that one. So when he's looking at that one, he's not looking at the other one, right? If he's looking at that one, he's not looking at the other one, right? So when he switches over to look at that one, he's no longer looking at that one, right? So it could just be the picture that switches, right? So every time that is showing this one, it switches over to another picture, and you're just thinking they're correlated because you decided to, right? You can't use this. You can't be in 2 places at once, right? You are violating your own experience, as you're trying to be in 2 places at once, and being able to compare these 2 instances into one instance somehow, right? It's a dysfunctional metaphor. We have to be strict about this, right? Because he's trying to screw with you.
Man on the TV on the right runs up, the little man on the TV on the left runs down, or something like this. And he is flabbergasted with this, because the little men are not communicating with one another across the TVs. How can that be? How can what happens on one side be so perfectly correlated with what happens on the other side?
But you, as I just say, you can't get to that, right? If you're switching between, then you're tapping into a reality that you have created in your mind, which is sort of an extended picture of what is going on, purely based on your mental abilities, right? If you're looking at one thing here, then you have empiricism about that television, right? When you're switching over to that one, you no longer have this empiricism over here. Because you're not looking at that screen, right? According to your analogy. So now you're looking at that one. You don't have that one over there anymore, right? So you can't do the comparison, actually.
Right? How do the little men know where to run? So to synchronize their behavior. Well, our time traveler is surprised because he thinks that the images on the TV are the game, that the images are the thing in itself. So if there are real little men running on the left and real little men running on the right...
Nope. What is real, right? Then you have to go down and see what are you actually... Because when you're looking at a screen, that screen is a part of your inner experience, right? It's just your experience. I mean, it's this smoke screen of the inside, outside, science, colors, words, terms. Everything is in one big pile, in my opinion, right? It needs to be structured, this. Even if it's, I would say, go as far as say, even if the structure might not be fully explanatory of the full picture of your philosophy, at least there is some structure to it, right? Otherwise, I would think that you would rather have it in one big pile of terms and then cherry pick whatever you need to go where you want to go, right? And create a structure where you say, okay, if I'm working at this place in my metaphysical structure, I can't just bring something else in from another level in the structure, right? So you are creating levels of philosophy in order to, because we are talking about some kind of reduction base or something that when we get to that undefinable thing, that then has to be the reduction base because we can't reduce it any further, right? And then we build back from that, build on top of that, and back to the full picture of our experience, but based on this reduction base, right? Otherwise, I would think that you just want to cherry pick whatever you want to get where you want to go, rather than being rigid and say, wherever the philosophy leads me, that's where I'm going. Rather than saying, I have to go over there and then stitch the dots together in order to get there. That's what I'm hearing with Bernardo Kastrup, right?
Then it's a miracle that they can coordinate their movements without communicating with one another. Just as it seems to be a miracle that what Bob sees correlates perfectly with what Alice chooses to see, chooses to measure. Now, of course, the fallacy here is to think of the images on the television as the game. The images are not the game. The images are representations of the game. The thing in itself is what's happening in the stadium, not what's happening inside the TVs. So if we understand that the world as it is in itself is not physical, many of the fantastical troubles.
That's too much. He can't say that. Maybe he can, right? I mean, if you say that to the materialist, or if we go from the materialist starting point, right, then we realize that which we are experiencing and calling the outside, so to say, right, cannot be an outside. It must be an experience within me, right? So when I'm referring to matter and energy and whatever, it's just a particular kind of description of my experience, right? If I then decide, okay, then why do I need an outside? Where does that outside come from in the first place? And I somehow establish that outside beyond my experiences, and without going into further discussion of how we do that, though I have pointed to how I would say how to do it, right? Then that outside is inapproachable from the point of view of the experience. If you're always referring to your experiences, then you are by definition not referring to that which is beyond your experiences, right? But he's saying because the experience is not that outside, then the outside cannot be like the experiences. Which is what he's saying there, it cannot be matter, right? Cannot be made of matter, right? Maybe he can say it. I'm not 100% sure. But because my thinking is that if you cannot say anything about what it is, it's unknowable. You can neither say what it is or what it isn't, right? He wants to refute matter as an explanation of that outside so that he can go and place whatever he needs to be there, right? It's so convoluted in this fashion. You have to really have your mind together to make sure that he's not screwing with you, right?
Some implications of quantum mechanics become very intuitive. We just have to look at 21st century evidence with a 21st century mind. But under materialism, we look at 21st century evidence with a 19th century mind, and that's not going to work. Now, finally, there is one more empirical reason why materialism is wrong. And that comes from the neuroscience of consciousness and psychiatry. Under materialism, experience is brain activity or is generated by brain activity. So there cannot be anything about the information content of experience that is not directly grounded in the dynamics of brain physiology. One is the other, so to say. And most of the times, this seems to work. Most of the times, more experience correlates with more brain activity. It's needless to say. There's lots of neuroimaging studies showing that ordinarily speaking, more experience, by more experience I mean more varied or intenser experience, correlates with more brain metabolism, more brain activity. However, there is a set of circumstances in which precisely the opposite happens. And this set is very reliable. It's the black swan. And if your theory is that all swans are white, that all experience is produced by brain activity, then one black swan is enough to break your theory and refute your theory. We know today, for instance, that psychedelics, all psychedelics that we have studied so far, work by significantly reducing brain activity and not increasing brain activity anywhere. Yet a psychedelic trip is known to be one of the top 3 most significant experiences in someone's life. And that's research by Johns Hopkins. While you're having the intensest and richest experience of your life, your brain...
Oh, so he's using that positive term. It's a rich experience, right? It's not a, scary experience. It's a rich experience, right? Oh, that's what a sophist does, right? They use sort of emotionally loaded words to make you think it's a good thing, this, right? And it's good philosophy because it's a nice word. It's rich and it's profound, right? There's sort of, in business and or in management, there are this what they call the bullshit bingo, right? It's sort of a, 4x6 card with, there are certain terms that they throw around and, empowerment and things like that, right? And there should also be a bullshit bingo in philosophy. Whenever people use the term profound, I'm like, okay, bullshit bingo, right? Bullshit bingo. And another term is a rich experience, right? That is bullshit bingo, right?
Is effectively going to sleep. As a matter of fact, it's not even that, because the sleeping brain dreaming has quite some activity, and under psychedelics there is a significant reduction in activity. And it's not only psychedelics. If you reduce blood flow to the brain or brain oxygenation by partial strangulation.
Oh man, I have to hear that again. Hang on.
Blood flow and activity, and under psychedelics there is a significant reduction in activity. And it's not only psychedelics. If you reduce blood flow to the brain or brain oxygenation by partial strangulation or by G-force induced loss of consciousness, people report trip-like.
Don't you need to make a disclaimer here? Hey, please don't do this at home, right? Please, if you try to strangle yourself, or make G-force induced, if you jump from the Eiffel Tower, you might have some whatever, right? You go in what's he called, these velodromes, right? And get some G-force, right? Oh my God. What the hell is he saying? Hey, if you try to strangle yourself, what fucking planet is he living on, man? Man, if you try to strangle yourself, don't do this at home, man, right? Okay.
Experiences, dreamlike experiences, very rich, very intense. Pilot.
Oh, it's very rich and intense. It's almost like hey, if you try to strangle yourself, right, you will have some rich and intense experiences. I mean, what the hell is this guy doing, man? He's trying to sell the idea that you will have some profound experiences if you try to strangle yourself. Oh, man. Obviously, this guy, he doesn't have children, right? It's fucking crazy, man.
Pilots that undergo G-force-induced loss of consciousness in a centrifuge during training, they report, quote, memorable dreams. Even people who suffer bullet wounds to the head, head trauma, or the progression of dementia, have been known to manifest what is called acquired savant syndrome. They suddenly become geniuses in certain areas of human activity. Like,
oh, hang on, man. I don't want to push these ideas, right? I need to make a disclaimer here because oh, man. I wasn't quite prepared for this. Shooting bullets through your head to become a genius. I know he's referring to an accident and not sort of somebody trying to shoot themselves, right? But again, you don't make it attractive to shoot your fucking head with a bullet, man. What are you doing, you fucking crazy idiot, man? Children, don't listen to this, man, right? Please, I'm sorry I'm bringing this up. I wasn't prepared for this. Please don't listen to this screwball idiot, man, right? Please, he's fucking crazy, man.
music composition, or memory, prodigious memory, or mathematical calculations that are done as fast as a computer. And if you ask them, how do they do that? They say, I don't know, this stuff just comes to me. And that...
Somebody shot me in the head? That's what you should say. I don't know. Yes, you know. Somebody fucking shot you in the head, and therefore you became a genius composer, right? Because that's what he needs. He needs that in order to, establish his fantastic metaphysics, right?
Follows severe brain trauma, lightning strikes to the head, bullet wounds, traffic accidents with major head trauma, even the progression of dementia, as I said. They have...
So now we are bringing in all the freaks and all the damaged people and say, yeah, we need the damaged people to explain the metaphysics here, right? They have had some weird experience. It's as I said in another presentation sometime. Yes, I have got a new car, a more interesting car, because I threw a spanner into the motor, right? Now it's saying some very interesting sounds, noises, right? Listen. Yeah, it's because it's different. It has been damaged. And now it's creating a symphony, my car, right? Listen. Fuck off.
There has been neuroimaging studies, for instance, of so-called mediums that...
Oh, a medium. Yeah, let's bring in the crazies, right? Oh, yeah, we need them to explain our very rigid and scientific and, PhD philosophy level metaphysics here, right?
write text down that they claim doesn't come from themselves. Now, I reserve judgment about this mediumship stuff, but the research is very objective and very well controlled.
Objective, okay, let me have your definition of objective, please, right? Would you mind?
It has been shown that for controls, if you ask a control group of people to write down complex,
aren't they using their empirical, their colors, the sound, and so on? What is it about those particular sounds and so whatever that makes it objective? What is it? Whoever does this science, they're opening their eyes and opening their ears, licking the sandwich, or whatever it is they're doing, right? Why are those qualia that they supposedly have all of a sudden objective? What is it that makes it go from something else to being objective, right?
Text, brain activity in key brain areas associated with cognition will increase significantly under a brain scan and an fMRI. But if mediums do that, brain activity significantly decreases in respect to the default brain activity baseline. And then people still have scored the respective texts according to a measure of complexity, which can be done very objectively through a computer program that analyzes.
Oh, so a computer program is all of a sudden objective. Okay, so computer program, add computer program to experience, therefore objective, or what?
Is the syntactical, grammatical, and semantical complexity of the text. And the text produced by the mediums scores higher in complexity than the text produced.
Complexity is an interpretation. It is an idea in human mind. You can't refer to complexity, which is an interpretation of qualia, right? So you can't say there's complexity there. Just because you have an idea of complexity doesn't mean there's complexity in that world out there beyond your experiences. He's blurring the lines between when he's talking about what here, right? He's basically full of shit, in my opinion. I don't buy any of this, right? At this point, I'm just, give me a fucking brain. Go. No, I won't say that, but man.
By the controls. And so this is not only psychedelics, it's not only the choking game, it's not only...
Basically, he's trying to do this, I'm right because science, right? Yeah, there's no matter out there, but science, right? Think of materialism as an equation in vacuum, right? And there's no matter out there. But I'm bringing in science.
Acceleration-induced loss of consciousness. It's not only mediumship, it's a whole host of activities that correlate with a reduction or an impairment of normal brain activity, which lead to higher cognitive skill, intenser, richer experience. And that...
Intenser and richer, yeah, bullshit bingo, right? Now we are doing the bullshit bingo.
That's a whole group of black swans for materialism. So materialism just doesn't work, logically or empirically.
Now he's throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? He wants you to just say, fuck science, right? Or fuck materialism. He's not saying fuck science. I might be a bit of a hit myself there, right? Because he's appealing to science. But it's just about realizing that your experiences that you treat or understand as a direct outside merely can be, at most, be classified as a representation of something outside, right? If you do that, you can keep going with your science. You just have to say, this is my experience. It's not objective in itself in any way that I could understand objective. Science is still subjective. And it has to stay subjective. Nobody can say, hey, I've done science. Now trust the science, right? That's the problem with science. And I want to add, another, disclaimer. Please don't, the things he said about, drugging yourself and having a bullet through your head to get some profound experiences, bullshit bingo, right? Please don't listen to this, right? Please don't listen to that, right? And if I might even encourage you to skip that part here, right? But, if you're a grown-up, please, if you're a child, please step out of this discussion in the first place, because it's, you might not have the mental cojones in order to get a grasp of this, right? And be able to be sufficiently critical of what he's saying. He's fucking crazy, right? He doesn't know what he's saying. He's not aware. He's not empathetic about what he's stating. He can't hear himself talk somehow, right? He doesn't understand what he's saying. He's talking about people strangling themselves, man, right? Having profound experiences. Give me a fucking break, man. It's crazy train. It's crazy talk, man. Right? Okay, please share, like, and subscribe. And, give me a comment. Let me know what you think. And otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.